Professor Westermann is from, he has this PhD in modern European history, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He will speak today about the Incremental Annihilation in Latvia, Einsatzkommando 2, and the ritual of mass murder. Professor Westermann is a very fruitful researcher. He have three interesting book. The last one is Drunk and Genocide, Alcohol and Mass Murder in Nazi Germany in 2021. And then we have Hitler's Auskrieg and the Indian Wars, comparing conquest and genocide from Norman University. And the third one from 2005, Hitler's Police Battalion, Enforcing Racial War in the East. Professor Westermann, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you so much, Yvonne, and thank you to the organizers. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen right now, so hopefully this will come up for everyone. Okay. The Baltic states were one of the first areas to experience the early phase of the Wehrmacht's blitzkrieg into the Soviet Union in the summer of 1941. For the Jews living in these areas, the rapid advance of the German military, along with SS and police forces in June and July, proved catastrophic, leading to the almost complete annihilation of the region's Jewish communities in the first 6 months of the war. This paper focuses on the fate of the Jewish community in Latvia, and specifically in LIEPAJA, to offer insights on what I describe as the process of incremental annihilation at the periphery of the final solution. Mass murder was a defining characteristic of the German-Soviet War and involved perpetrators from a number of organizations within the Nazi administration, the SS and police, local auxiliaries, and the Wehrmacht. The scope and scaling of the killing varied based on the institutional affiliations of the perpetrators and according to factors such as geography and chronology. With respect to the role of space, recent Holocaust scholarship has focused on the motive force of genocide in relation to the influence of the center versus the periphery. While the order for the destruction of European Jews came from Berlin, the concept of the periphery in Latvia was fluid and defies a simple binary between Berlin and Riga, but rather includes fractals of this relationship between Riga and the Latvian countryside. This paper focuses on the way in which actors at the local level negotiated and implemented plans for the destruction of the Latvian Jews. The actions of Einsatzkommando 2 and the manner in which the mass murder of the Latvian Jews developed during the autumn of 1941 highlights the conduct of mass murder, often as an incremental process involving routine small-scale killings. The daily activities of the SS and police offices in LIEPAJA offer not only a view of the quotidian process of annihilation, but also the types of rituals and activities associated with the preparation, conduct, and celebration of these acts. Drawing from German SS and police sources, survivor and witness testimonies, and the post-war interrogation records of SS Sergeant Hans Baumgartner, a member of EK2, this presentation examines the process and velocity of killing in Latvia in the fall of 1941. And it also offers insights into the mindsets of the killers on the periphery. In the case of Latvia, members of Einsatzgruppen A entered cities in the south by the end of June 1941 and subsequently reached the capital Riga on July 1st. During the initial occupation, individual detachment Teilkommandos composed of SS and police forces spread across the countryside, promoting massacres against the Jewish population by indigenous paramilitary groups or conducting their own mass shootings. A report by the security police addressing operations in Latvia declared, quote, "The goal of Einsatzkommando 2 from the beginning was a radical solution to the Jewish problem through the execution of all Jews. A member of EK2, Baumgartner, revealed that he had learned from his direct superior, SS Lieutenant Wolfgang Kugler, in early July that the unit's task involved the, quote, annihilation of the Jews by shootings. By the end of October 1941, members of the SS and police, local auxiliaries, and in some cases Wehrmacht personnel had murdered at least 30,000 Latvian Jews, or some 43% of the country's Jewish population. Of those still alive, the majority were concentrated and confined in ghettos in Riga, Daugavpils, as well as in LIEPAJA. In November and December, these remaining Jewish communities faced a second round of large-scale murder, resulting in the near-complete annihilation of Latvia's Jewish population. In fact, the meeting protocol of the notorious Wannsee Conference, held on January 20th, 1942, listed a mere 3,500 remaining Latvian Jews, or about 5% of the pre-war population. The experience of the Jews in Latvia in general, and specifically the actions of EK2 and LIEPAJA during the initial 6 months of the German occupation, exemplify several facets of Nazi rule. First, the experience of the Jews in LIEPAJA and of their co-religionists in the Baltic states writ large demonstrates the routinization of mass murder from the first days of the Nazi occupation and highlights the incremental process of annihilation. Second, a focus on LIEPAJA, a naval base of strategic importance on the coast of the Baltic Sea, reveals the interconnectedness between the Nazi civil administration, SS and police forces, Latvian police auxiliaries, and Wehrmacht forces in shaping the course of mass murder. It also highlights elements of cooperation and competition between these institutions in the conduct of genocide. Finally, the murder of the Jews of LIEPAJA provides a key insight into how population policies functioned at the local level and exposes the ways by which Nazi administrators sought to protect and exert power at the outermost periphery. Before the German invasion, LIEPAJA had a large and vibrant Jewish community of over 7,000, with numerous religious, social, and educational organizations, including a Yiddish high school, various trade schools, and 10 synagogues. After a week-long battle for the city between German and Soviet forces, the Jews and the symbols of their religious community became daily targets of abuse by the occupiers. Yaron Westermann, a survivor, recalled the entry of German military forces on June 29. He observed, quote, already in the very first days, there were Jews murdered, and, quote, almost every day there was news of arrested and murdered Jews. The process of murder, as in other cities and towns throughout the East, often included rituals of humiliation, especially aimed at Jewish leaders and the artifacts of their faith. In the case of the former, German forces, upon their entry into Daugavpils, quote, systematically terrorized and humiliated Jewish men by forcing them to, quote, jump like frogs, make distorted faces, and perform all kinds of ridiculous gestures with their hands, heads, and feet, as their tormentors laughed. In some cases, the abuse included sexual violence. In the town of Bauska, Jewish women became the targets of sexual abuse by the German occupiers, as they were, quote, forced to dance in the nude before being raped and killed. With regard to symbols of religious faith, the Germans ordered LIEPAJA's Jews to participate in the demolition of the city's synagogues and use these materials for other construction projects. Furthermore, Kugler, the commander of EK2, had Torah scrolls from the synagogues unrolled on Firehouse Square before proceeding to ride his horse over the sacred texts, a ritual of humiliation intended, as one witness asserted, quote, to eradicate the spirit of Judaism itself. The Wehrmacht also took an active role in the persecution. The city's military commandant not only issued the initial anti-Jewish regulations on July 5th, but also authorized a reprisal shooting of 30, quote, Bolshevist hostages 3 days later, and threatened the execution of 100 hostages for every wounded German soldier. Likewise, the naval commandant of LIEPAJA, Commander Hans Kavelmacher, requested additional SS forces be sent at the end of July to accelerate the murder of the city's Jews, a request that was approved and led to the execution of some 1,000 male Jews on July 24th and July 25th. For those caught in between the military and civilian administration, small and large-scale killing became a daily fact of life. Michael Liebauer spent over 2 years working at the LIEPAJA headquarters of EK2 and described how during this time, quote, regular, relatively small actions involving the murder of 20, 30, or 40 people proved to be the rule. In fact, these acts range from individual murders, such as that of the Viennese-born composer Walter Hahn, who had fled Austria in 1938, to mass killings involving hundreds of victims. On June 29th, SS and police forces began killing Jews and suspected communists in groups of 25 to 30 throughout the day by using the tank ditches in the city's Rheinis Park as ready-made graves. This initial wave of killing continued for a week, during which an estimated 1,430 persons perished. The park, however, soon turned out to be a poor choice, as the summer heat and the shallow covering over the graves caused a stench, to which the Germans responded by having the Jews disinter the bodies and transport them out to sand dunes near the naval base before murdering these work details. The new murder site, located next to the lighthouse, became one of 3 locations for the murder of LIEPAJA's Jews throughout the remainder of the occupation. Throughout the first 3 weeks of July, the partial detachment of EK2 established a ritual for murder. Early in the morning, 25 to 60 Jews were loaded onto trucks and taken to a prepared grave in the dunes, where they were forced to undress and shot. For his part, Baumgartner recalled the regularity of weekly executions conducted in the early morning and remarked that for, quote, smaller executions, groups of fewer than 20, the firing squad would conduct the killings first and then return for breakfast, a mundane and equally horrifying reflection of the normalization of murder among these men. These early killings in LIEPAJA also highlight a key point related to the continuing contest between the Reichskommissar Ostland, Heinrich Lohse's office, and security police forces within Latvia proper. Outside of Riga, Lohse's administrative headquarters, SS and police forces enjoyed great autonomy at the local level and reduced administrative supervision, allowing for more freedom of action. Between June and August, killings, both small and large, stretched across Latvia, especially in towns and villages. In Rēzekne, SS and police forces began killing groups of 20 to 60 Jews daily in the first week of July, before conducting a mass execution using over 30 trucks to transport thousands of Jews from the local prison to a wooded site, the Akupani Hills, near the city. In Bauska, SS and police forces executed an estimated 2,000 Jewish men, women, and children held in the town's ghetto in a nearby forest during July. In another example of the accelerating pace of annihilation outside of the capital, a mass killing of at least 1,000 Jewish men took place in Daugavpils on July 9th and July 10th, witnessed by Wehrmacht soldiers and their, quote, sweethearts, the local Latvian population, and filmed by German authorities. The Office of the Wehrmacht Armaments Inspection, in a report on August 11, discussing the, quote, Jewish question, identified the disparity between killings in Riga and in other areas of Latvia. The report noted that while Riga had, quote, hardly been touched in any way, the inspection team referred to mass shootings in LIEPAJA. In one respect, the military inspector's knowledge of the killings in LIEPAJA is not surprising, since groups of soldiers and sailors gathered to watch executions in July and August at the lighthouse site. The Wehrmacht also hints at a critical point involving the decentralization of mass murder in Latvia and the key role of individual SS and police commanders in establishing the rate and velocity of killing. In fact, the willingness to use one's own initiative in pursuit of the goals of Nazi racial policy was a desired trait for leaders at all levels of the Einsatzgruppen. Walter Munch, a member of the staff of EGA, made exactly this point during post-war testimony. Quote, I mean, today one really makes completely different and false conceptions of how it, i.e. the killing, really took place. He continued, quote, in effect, the unit leader had the possibility without any negotiation and without any questions, he could immediately order and conduct an execution. This possibility was vested in every unit leader, end quote. This was certainly the case for LIEPAJA, as noted by Baumgartner, who testified that his commander, Kugler, quote, had the power over life and death. The command responsibility given to the Einsatzgruppen leaders, from the top to the lowest levels, emphasized initiative and self-reliance in pursuit of mass murder. And I believe Captain Korb will be speaking more about this later. In this sense, Karl Jäger's efforts as commander of EK3 comes immediately to mind, as do the actions of his subordinate, SS Lieutenant Joachim Hamann. In fact, Hamann, with a squad of 8 to 10 SD men, accompanied by auxiliaries, moved throughout Lithuania in the first 2 months of the invasion, committing tens of thousands of murders. In the case of EK3, ingenuity at lower levels of command found expression in killings that crossed across the geographic and political boundaries of individual commissariats. While the majority of those killed by EK3 resided in Lithuania, EK3 entered Daugavpils repeatedly between July and August, murdering 9,012 Jewish men, women, and children, and 573, quote, active communists. As Yitzhak Arad noted, the tempo of annihilation was, quote, not uniform, and there were periods in which the murder actions moved at great speed and others in which the pace was slower. In the case of the latter, the murder of 37 Jews in LIEPAJA on September 23rd provides one example of the incremental pace of annihilation. Importantly, SS and police forces in LIEPAJA distinguish between those capable of work and those seen as a burden. Kugler made this point explicit in an activity report of October 2nd, in which he noted the execution of 241 of the city's Jews over the previous 8 days. In the report addressed to SS and police city leader, SS Lieutenant Colonel Fritz Dietrich, he declared, quote, the elimination of the elderly Jewish men and women in Libau who do not come in consideration for labor is in motion, end quote. The killing continued over the next 2 weeks, during which SS and police forces murdered another 214 of the city's Jews, as well as 40 communists. With respect to these killings, it is unclear whether the total includes 67 Jews executed in LIEPAJA on October 11th by the local order police forces. Regardless, these 3 weeks of killing alone reduced the city's Jewish population by over 10%, bringing it well below 4,000. One example of the cumulative effects of annihilation experienced over the course of the German occupation as a result of the joint efforts of security police and order police forces. Security police plans called for the murder of an even greater number of the city's Jewish population in October. However, Loz's concern about the loss of skilled labor and complaints from Nazi district administrators led to his direct intervention, ostensibly to prevent further, quote, wild executions in the city. Dr. Walter Alnor, the Gebietskommissar or district commissar responsible for LIEPAJA, had raised concerns about the, quote, numerous mass shootings of the Jews in the last weeks of October. He cited the murder of 470 persons in LIEPAJA, as well as the annihilation of the Jewish community of Eisput, including 12 men and 321 women and children. In the case of the latter, Al-Noor noted that both he and the local military commander had protested without success against the killing based on Loz's earlier instructions. Despite the protests, a group of SD men and Latvian auxiliaries left LIEPAJA early in the morning for Aisput, where the entire Jewish population, men, women, and children, were confined. Beginning at 10 a.m., the police escorted small groups of 10 to a prepared gravesite. After finishing the executions at around 4 p.m., the perpetrators returned to LIEPAJA, stopping at the police club for free food and beer before embarking upon a, quote, drinking bout to commemorate another day of mass murder. The destruction of the Jewish community in Aisput raises an important point. In discussions related to the influence of policymakers at the center, i.e. Berlin, versus the initiative taken by those at the periphery in the occupied areas, one element that is often missed is that the term periphery is a relative spatial concept. While Loza sought to establish his authority over SS and police forces in the RKO, the same bureaucratic and political battle was being waged in the General Commissariat of Latvia and between Nazi administrators and their SS and police counterparts at the district level. In these cases, the struggle was between the leadership in the center in Riga and the periphery of the cities and villages. And I'll just briefly note, I showed this slide from Yaar because it shows a blank spot on the map. There are only about 32 killing sites that are located in Latvia right now that are designated, and there are many, many more to be uncovered there. In conclusion, while mass shootings tend to be the focus of most legal proceedings and historical accounts, the regular small-scale killing actions that typify daily life in LIEPAJA demonstrates the way in which murder was normalized among the perpetrators, leading to the cumulative annihilation of the local Jewish population, a number totaling 11,860 victims by mid-October. Bernhard Fess, a survivor, recalled how, quote, the murderers raged with particular fury in rural areas and in small Latvian towns, where it took the gangs of murderers only days to exterminate the entire Jewish population. This routinization of murder can be seen in the bi-monthly situation reports of the SS and police city leader in LIEPAJA. A report of December 1st, 1941, noted the arrest of, quote, communist agitators and revealed the execution of 45 persons, including 10 communists and 35, quote, politically incriminated Jews. He also referred to executions in the 2-week period that included 35 communists and 53 Jews, as well as the, quote, evacuation of 101 Sinti and Roma to Saldus, who were, quote, executed there. With respect to the execution of the Jews, one Latvian SD auxiliary, Josip Linats, discussed his participation in these murders of 30 to 40 persons in early December at Skej. Over the course of the 2-hour action, he remembered the killers taking refreshment from a vat of coffee spiked with cognac. Despite the attention given to large-scale killings, including the 15 to 17 December massacre of almost 3,000 Jewish men, women, and children at Skej, the reality of mass murder in LIEPAJA and throughout Latvia found expression in daily and weekly smaller-scale killings that over a period of only 4 months left the countryside, quote, free of Jews. In this sense, the efforts by Nazi civil administration at every level to preserve a slave labor force often had minimal effects on SS and police units at the local level tasked with the final solution. Ultimately, this paper reveals the power of the periphery in the actions taken by individuals like Fritz Dietrich, Wolfgang Kügler, and Hans Baumgartner in creating facts on the ground that resulted in genocide. The road to the annihilation of LIEPAJA's Jewish community may have originated in Berlin and wound its way through Riga, but it was the actions of a mere handful of men who transformed the idea from an apocalyptic fantasy into a reality among the sand dunes on a Baltic beach. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your very chilling speak. I'm still moved by it. Thank you so much. Our next speaker will be Noam Korb. Noam is a captain in the Israeli army. He's also a student of political science in Haifa University and of Jewish history in Tel Aviv University. He is an independent Holocaust researcher and a student in Israeli Defense Force.
In response to Shmuel's question, I think he's absolutely right in terms of the expatriate communities, Lithuanian, Latvian, Ukrainian, and North America, especially after World War II, posited those countries as victims of Soviet aggression and essentially discarded their own participation in annihilation. There's a couple of, with respect to Lithuania, Rita Gabas, a guest at the Shooters Banquet, Sylvia Foti's book, The Nazis' Granddaughters, looks at the perpetration by family members, grandfathers, of these auxiliaries. So there's quite a bit about that. An academic study that looks at that is Kathleen Reichel's German book on Latvian and German occupation. So the point is there's a great deal of evidence showing how these auxiliaries were involved in killing. And one specific example I can give in my own research is I have several instances where Latvian or Lithuanian killing groups come back from killing operations and they're singing nationalist songs. And I found that very important because what they're doing is they're asserting Latvian or Lithuanian national identity while denouncing or denationalizing through song their Jewish victims. And Daniela's question about the auxiliary participation, I think one of the things we have to remember about that is certainly the Einsatzkommando is big if we look at Latvia, but there's a lot of Ordnungspolizei and Sicherheitspolizei or security police auxiliaries who are operating under German command, who are involved in these killings as well. So you have a mixture in some cases of auxiliaries with German forces. And the reason I showed that slide for LIEPAJA that shows about a 5,000, 6,000 difference in the numbers of killed is because we have the Einsatzgruppen that are reporting killings, but we have all these other groups that are involved. So Ordnungspolizei, security police, Wehrmacht. And so what we see is a lot of those numbers that we use in our discussions of killing are really suspect in terms of we have to be able to integrate them at a greater level. And I think that that's important because we're missing pieces here, especially these smaller scale killings.
Sorry, I was on mute. Leonid, you had a remark to Edward and Noam. Would you like to? Would you like to ask them or to remark it out loud?
Yes, so with Noam, we already spoke in private conversation. So we cleared the matter, but with Edward, yes, there was an amateur. I only wanted to say that there was an amateur short film of the German soldier. I don't remember. In our project Untold Stories in Yad Vashem, we have his film where he shows there the very short film where he shows also the involvement of the Navy personnel there, which act near the graves there as the shooters.
Yeah, Leonid, that's the Reinhard Wiener film, and it's from July and August 1941. And the Holocaust Museum, it's also available on their website if people want to look at it. But what's very interesting about it, it shows trucks arriving with groups of 6 to 10 Jewish men, and they're being escorted to a shooting pit in the sand dunes. But the most fascinating part of that scene is you have hundreds of spectators who are military spectators from the local base at LIEPAJA that are standing around smoking. You have dogs running around the execution site and watching, essentially spectating at this site. So it gives you a real idea of widespread knowledge of these killings in particular at this area based on the location of the naval base, but it also shows you very closely these smaller scale killings that are taking place in the sand dunes at the naval base area.
Okay, anyone else?
What I would respond to that is the velocity that we see in the murders, especially in the Baltics, really pinpoints the act of murder of Jewish populations as being intrinsic to the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union. So I think that the important thing, when we talk about Madagascar, there's a couple of misconceptions there. Number one, obviously, the Germans can't do it because they don't have the transport capability and they don't control the seas. But Madagascar was also not just dropping off Jews and leaving them there. It was going to be a giant concentration site run by the SS again. So when people talk about Madagascar, a lot of times I think they have the mistaken impression that this was a way to isolate Jews from Germany, and Germany would have been happy, kind of like forced migration, but or immigration. But I think that that's important to mention that was not going to be a site just leaving Jews there and going away. They would have still been under German control.
Well, okay, thank you all. Thank you for your marvelous research and speak to us.